Audio recording for this meeting has begun.
Okay, and then voila. So hello everyone, and welcome to today's EMOS webinar to introduce you to the main concepts of seasonal and calendar adjustments, trend cycle, irregular components, and related time series issues. You will also learn a lot about a software called JDEMETRA Plus. The talk will be given by Dario Buono, who is a team leader in Eurostat for methodology in official statistics. Before giving the floor to him, you would remember that as a participant, you can watch and listen to the session, but do not switch on your webcam or your microphone. For interaction, you should share your views on the chat room, which you see on the right-hand side of your screen and which everybody pretty much knows how to use already. At the end of the session, you can download the presentation, and I will send you the link to the recording later. I would also take this opportunity to inform those participants who will continue with us for the future webinars to announce that as of next week, we will be changing the webinar tool from Adobe to WebEx. Now, some of you may already be familiar with it, but in any case, I will send you a link to test your connection beforehand. The next webinar will be next Wednesday at the same time here from Luxembourg. Now, you may know the tool better than I do, and once I get familiar with it, I'm sure it will improve your webinar experience. Until then, please be patient with me. But now the floor is Dario's. Enjoy the session, and I will go on the back seat of this business. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Ali, for this nice presentation. Welcome, everyone. I see we have 42 people now. So as I said, I'm Dario Buono from Eurostat. I know some of you. For those that you don't know, you find here in the first slide some of my contacts. You can also, after the session, you can write to me and maybe also tweet to me if you feel like. Before I start, I just like to verify that you can hear me well. So if someone in the public chat can confirm that the sound is good. I see people are typing. Just say good. Okay, sound is good. Okay, so very well. So I guess we can kick off. So as you can see, I prepared a kind of maybe 80 slides for 1 hour and a half. This might seem a lot. We will see what we will do. As Ali said, it's a webinar about time series and seasonal adjustment, hopefully also about how to use the software JDEMETRA Plus. Of course, it's a bit difficult to have an interactive session on using a software, but you will see on the slides that I provide some screenshot, and then we can talk about that. Today, I thought about splitting this webinar in 4 main parts. The first one will be time series analysis and seasonality. The second one will be about the calendar effects and outliers. Then we will dig a little bit into the mathematical part of the process, in particular the decomposition and what are the alternatives. And we will have a quick look to the 2 main philosophy or methods that are to be used for doing seasonal adjustment, namely X13 ARIMA and Tramosits, and how these are linked to the ESS guideline on seasonal adjustment. ESS stands for European Statistical System, as might of you know. And then at the end, if we have time, we will see a detailed step-by-step procedure. So I tried to put for you together, different kind of 8-9 steps that you might want to do when you're doing seasonal adjustment, and possibly also how to do this with the JDEMETRA Plus. So as I said, there are 4 sessions. I will stop for a while at the end of each these 4 parts, and so that maybe we can have a little check on if what I'm trying to share with you is clearer or not. So then at that moment I will ask you some questions, so try to follow, and then in order to reply to the question, simply use the chat. So the first thing is that we have to have a common understanding of what is a time series. So the definition that I'm going to use for this for today, and actually that I use also in the daily job, is that a time series is a sequence of measures that of a given phenomena which are taken at regular time intervals. And these time intervals can be every hour, every day, every week, every month, every quarter, or every year, or also every 5 years, for instance. And the type, it's important to have a common understanding of this, because not all the time series that we are normally confronted with are going to be relevant for the sake of the seasonal adjustment. So I'd like to keep in mind that what is relevant is that it's regular time intervals, and I would immediately start with the first. So the idea is that the normal time series would look like this. This is a monthly, quarterly data for the Italian GDP. You see a clear trend, upward trend here in the series with some seasonal pattern, which are these regular movements that they go up and down here, in this case, every quarter. So, as I said, if we try to use definition, the very first question that I would have for you is try to see, say we have these 8 observations for 2008 and 2009, first quarter 100, second quarter 200, then in August 30, fourth quarter 2015, then 90, 120, 100, and 190. So the first question for you is, do we have a time series here in front of us on the screen? So let's see what are the first 3 that are going to answer to this question. Okay, very good. So Lithuania, Poland, Poland and Hungary, they got it right. Of course, this is not a time series because the frequency is not, the time interval is not the same. So it's a mix of quarterly and monthly time series. So, but then what happened? Sorry, that was too fast. Of course, here that was the key. That is the frequency is different. Now, if I remove the monthly observation from there, is this a time series now? Let's see the first 3 answers. Okay, I see here that there are some mixed feelings. And actually, we have some good answer from Hungary. This is a time series with 1 missing observation. Okay, so the interval is regular, but we miss 1 observation now. So I guess this is quite clear as a concept. And so let's try to go then to the next step, which is the one to identify what are the characteristics of a time series. So normally, a time series is a series of data recorded at a regular interval, and what we are, the statistician that is working with this kind of data is normally trying to do the job a little bit of the doctor. So it's to identify the different part of the body of this time series, and this part you might think about being components. And there are some usual components that you find in a time series, which are the trend cycle, which is the long-term evolution of the series, the seasonal part, which are the fluctuation observed during the year, which appear to be regular every year. Then there are the calendar component, which is mainly the link of any economic effect, which is due to the different number of a specific day in a week. And this part, together with the other components, the irregular and the outliers, are the parts of this body which are the time series, which we will try to disentangle from one from to the other. So mainly, the work that you would like to do is to identify how big are all these parts, and possibly to see how they behave, to model them, and then to see if there are some parts that are actually not providing information, but more kind of providing noise that should be removed. And so if we think about what are the reasons why we have, in particular, the seasonal pattern, normally these are associated with the climate condition, so weather condition, but also the different behavior of the institutions, so and the social habits, the administrative rules that we have, that we used to work from Monday to Friday, at least in Europe. In some other country, so for us the first day of the week is Monday, and then in some countries you work on Saturday, and some other you don't work on Saturday, you don't go to school, for instance, on Saturday, on Sunday. But in some other countries the first day of the week it's actually Saturday, it's not Monday. And actually also what we will try to think about is also the link between different series that are they might have a lagged effect. For instance, in the toy industry, we see an effect which is due to Christmas, So the idea is that, so why we want to adjust the series. So first of all, as you said, we try to identify the different components of the seasonal adjustment. We try to remove the part which is repeatedly regular, and it's mainly using causing some noise in the data. So the idea is that in this way we can improve the comparability over the time. So for instance, we can compare better two consecutive quarters, the first quarter of January or February with the fourth quarter where they had Christmas, but also comparability across space, because in different places on Earth we have a different weather at the same time. So you might think that spending Christmas in Mexico, for instance, you would go to the beach, while in Europe you go maybe skiing. So the habits are different, and the effects in different economic domains are also different. So in a nutshell, basically, this part, the two components of the time series, which are the seasonal component and the calendar component, are fluctuations that are observed during the year, as I said, and the idea of the seasonal adjustment process is that we have to identify how big they are, how regular they are, both the seasonal and calendar adjustment, and then eventually remove it. Now, at this point of the presentation, it's important also already to understand that the impact of the seasons is different in terms of size and magnitude with the one to the calendar. And actually this impact, the impact of these two components, depends also on the frequency of the series. In general, for instance, the impact of the calendars on quarterly series is less important than the impact of the calendar on monthly series. Simply, you might have to think one additional day in a quarter, one additional working day in a quarter has a less impact than one additional working day in a month. So you think about in that context. So as said, mentioned already, the goal is to decompose the time series. The goal of seasonal adjustment is to decompose the time series in different components, and then removing the seasonal effect, including the calendar effect. And you might want to think about this process as a process of noise reduction. Some words on calendar adjustment. We will spend also some words afterwards. As I said, the reason, the phenomena that are linked to the calendar adjustment are those that are linked to the fact that we have different working days in a specific period. Also the composition of the working days, because we might work half day or not. The presence in some particular year of the leap year effect, so one additional day in the month of February. And also the fact that some holidays are moving from one month to the other, like Easter that might fall either in March or in April, or the Ramadan, which is a backward moving holidays that is mainly happening in two specific weeks backwards every year. So if this year is in October, the next year will be in September, and then the year after will be in August, and so on. Then, as I said, when after removing the seasonal and the calendar components, you are left with the trend plus the irregular part. And so once you've identified the trend, so the irregular part is the regular, is the leftover, if you want, of the process. And this is very important to understand at this very moment, that the irregular, which is also called the residual part, is mainly the structure of what we leave out, will be crucial to understand if the process that we are doing is correct or not. So mainly the diagnostics that we'll be using to assess if the seasonal adjustment process was correctly done or not will be based also on the structure of the irregulars. So all the diagnostics that you find also in the output of JDEMETRA Plus are based on the structure of the residual. Now, some additional requirements, some additional information about the data requirements. Seasonal adjustment is done for series that are collected at frequencies that are less than annually. So mainly we are talking about monthly or quarterly data. This also means that you might be confronted with this issue of seasonal adjustment also with series that are collected, for instance, every 4 quarters, so 13 times per year. And actually, we are also conducting some studies where we are looking into the weekly and also daily data to see the effect of seasonal adjustment there. I will mention something about that later in my presentation. And what is important is that, as we say, that, in order to be a time series, also that the definition of the concept and the way it's measured should be consistent over time. So these are 2 of the main data requirements. And something else that it's important to say immediately is that there is one misconception is that actually seasonal adjustment does not remove the outliers that are present. So identifying the outliers helps to identify the components, but the outliers, depending on also on their structure, are left in the data that are the output of the process. We will see this in mathematical terms later and will become more clear, but seasonal adjustment, even if it's a smoothing process, does not remove the outliers. Some other tricks and suggestions about the data quality, the data characteristics. Keep in mind that the effect of the seasons and the effect of the calendar days during a certain time period might change, might evolve. And it's not necessarily true that the longer the time series, the better they are in order to identify a regular seasonal pattern. So the idea is also that it's true that we have to have a minimum number of series or minimum number of data on which we can base and decide if to trust or not the diagnostics. But it's also true that to have time series that are too long might also be an issue. And we will see more about this requirement later. This is just to give you the intuition. So now, just to give you if you want, an advanced vision of what happens after seasonal adjustments. In the beginning, you have data that they look like the one that are displayed now. So a trend and a regular seasonal pattern. This is still the Italian GDP. This is a quarterly series. As you can see, when you identified the calendar component and you remove the calendar part, in particular for quarterly series, the original series and the calendar adjusted one, they look pretty much the same. So this is the idea that, as I told you before, for quarterly series, the calendar effect is actually not so high. So even if you're able to identify this kind of effect, the correction that is done for calendar adjustment itself is not so big. A little bit different in terms of seasonal adjustment. As you can see now, the seasonal adjusted series are the one on the blue line, which are much smoother than the original one, which are the red. The series has been cleaned, so the noise that is due to the presence of the season has been removed. And in this respect, now it's more comparable with series where that are, for instance, for other countries, where also the seasonality has been removed. This is important, especially, this we have seen in terms of levels here, but especially in terms of growth rates. So the growth rates of the original series, you can see that they would look pretty much stable. And so it would be difficult to understand if there is in which phase of the economic we are. And this is the same, the growth rates of the original series and the calendar adjusted series. But after seasonal adjustment, you start to see actually the real movement of the economy with the peaks and some upward and downward trends, much better than when looking at the growth rates of the original series. So this is pretty much the intuition of what we're trying to talk about today. And I will start with then some other questions for you. So the chat is open again. So the question for you, let's see the first 3 to answer, is that why are we doing seasonal adjustment? And please don't use more than 5 or 6, 7 words. Okay, to compare data is a good answer. To cancel noise is a good answer. Business cycle analysis, different country for instance. Okay, so it's mainly an issue of normalization. This is very well data. And what are the data that you can seasonal adjust? Intra-annual data. Okay, Georgia, we are now on the second question. Frequency data, monthly and quarterly, consistency, short-term data. Maybe, yeah, okay. Intra-annual, okay. That sounds good. So I see that you are still on board. So I guess we can proceed now. And in this second part, I'd like to focus a little bit on the outliers and on the calendar effect. In particular, as I said, the misconception that we have in seasonal adjustment is that the outliers are removed. The outliers actually are not removed, are kept. And actually, what is important also to understand is that there are different kinds of outliers. And in particular, for the sake of what is done also with the in line with the guidelines and the software that we are using, we differentiate 3 main types of outliers, which are the additive outlier, the transitory change, and the level shift. Then, on the calendar effect, we have 2 main reasons to have a calendar effect, which are the one that are due to the trading days, and one mainly due to the moving holidays. So, if you want to spend some more word about on the outliers, so as we said, we have 3 types that we deal with. An additive outlier is the value of only one observation, which is different from, which is affected in the time series. This may be caused by random effect or strike, bad weather, or simply a data entry mistake. In a temporary change, we have the value of one observation is extremely high or low, and the deviation reduced gradually. So one observation is affected, and then 2 or more consecutive observations are also affected. Then in a level shift, we have a clear point in time where basically the level shifts either up or down, or there is a change in the trend tendency, if you want. So from one moment onwards, things are not the same anymore compared to the past. Visually, you might think about the type of outliers that are displayed here in this graph. So an additive outlier is, you have the time series, one spot goes up and then down. For temporary change, you go up and then you go slightly back to the normal path. And for a level shift, you go up and then you stay up there. It's important to have a clear understanding of which kind of outliers we are confronted with, because depending on the nature of the outliers are assimilated to the different components. So in particular, the additive outlier and transitory change, they are in the regular component, and the level shift is in the trend component. So that means that after the decomposition, you will see them as part of the trend component or as part of the regular component. So it's very important to, when doing the outlier identification, also to identify the type of outliers that we are confronted with. Of course, this job is, if you want, maybe one of the most difficult, but also the most interesting part of being a statistician, because actually, who is deciding if this outlier is an additive outlier or a transitory change? There are some diagnostics, there are some tests that can be done, but of course, what is always good is to have also an economic explanation for a particular phenomenon that is happening in time series. And that's why here I'm mentioning the explanation. And what is also important to understand is that since the outlier identification takes place in the beginning of the process, it's important to define the type of outlier we are confronted with in the very beginning and very well. So possibly here is where you have some subjectivity that will play a role to decide if an outlier should be treated as an additive outlier or a transitory change. In general, there is a rule of thumb that you should not have more than 5% of outliers all over the number of observations, but also, as I said, there are some diagnostic tests that are helping you to identify the type of outliers. I guess the main message that I have here is that outliers, they contain information, should be explained. The statistical test is not enough to decide if an outlier is which kind of outlier, if it's an additive outlier or transitory change, for instance. An economic reason should always be associated, and only in very rare case, when it's then found out that the outlier was a data entry, for instance, then that value should be removed and eventually being estimated with the ARIMA model that is used for the ARIMA decomposition. I prepared here another example with some data. So these are quarterly series over 4 years, and the idea here is that is it possible to visually understand if there is seasonality in the series, and we see also if it's possible to identify something else. As you can see, in the table on the left, there are the values, and in the table on the right, there are the differences. So you see that there is always an increase from the first to the second quarter. There is always a decrease from the second to third quarter, and so on. So it's regular in vertical, the direction of the changes. So this is a first visual sign of presence of seasonality. But then, of course, what happens if, for instance, we change one number, this number 100, which was supposed to, in the third quarter, which is supposed to be lower than the second quarter, and we change to a different number, which is, maybe 180. And we keep on the right just the sign of the direction. You see that when you check vertically the sign, then you have plus, plus, plus here, minus, minus, minus there, and a plus there. So there is a change in the direction. So this value was expected to be lower than the second quarter, and now it's higher. So, and this can be identified visually also in this way. And of course, this would lead to a possible explanation that this value, since it's only one, might either be then an additive outlier or a level shift, because the following and the previous data are not concerned. So if you want, this one kind of table that could intuitively help to understand if there is seasonality or not. And actually, this is also good to see if there is the series is stationary in general. Now, I stopped a moment because I think I lost the chat, the public chat. Can someone type in the chat to see if there are questions again? Okay, I see the typing now. Okay, it was cleaned for some reason. Okay, so I guess we can continue now. Let's focus a little bit now. Let's spend a little bit of time on calendar effect. There are two kinds of series at least that we can articulate. Actually, there are three. There is one type of missing here. We have the flow series, the flow time series, where the monthly or the quarterly series, the sum of the monthly series is the quarterly decided variable. You can think about the flow series, for instance, in the as the GDP, which is the sum of the flows in each sub-quarter, or the stock series, where the variable is observed at some point in time. So, for instance, you might think about the population that is normally recorded at the beginning of the year, or the stock variable, so how much stock you have in your, if you're a business enterprise, how much stock you have at the end of the year. The calendar effect is normally most relevant and significant for the flow series. So, and the intuition here is that an additional number of working days in a particular month can, in theory, increase the production. But of course, then this can also be the other way around. As mentioned before, we also have the other kind of calendar adjustment effect, which are due to the moving holidays. This is basically our holidays that are not always in the same day of the month, as we have seen Easter. And this is important, for instance, because it falls either in March or April, and in particular, if you are dealing with quarterly data, this might have an effect either in the second or in the third quarter. There are different, an additional aspect of the calendar effect. It's also what is the so-called difference between the trading days and the working days. And this is relevant also because of the way you then assess the presence of the calendar effect. The idea of the identification of the presence of the calendar effect is basically to build a regressor that would explain the different amount of flows in the original data. And you might want to do this in at least two different ways. So one is to differentiate the number of days where you work from the number of days where you don't work. So you sum up all the days that are from Monday to Friday, and then you leave on the other side Saturday and Sundays. And so in that way you can model with a dummy variable with one regressor only this process. Another way of doing this is normally goes under the word of working day adjustment. Another way of doing this is that you might want to test if there is a specific day during the week which is supposed to have an effect. So then you would build a regressor counting how many, for instance, Mondays there are in a month, assuming that if the Monday is the day where you would expect to see an effect. You can think about cases when, this is also why it's called the trading day. So for in the financial market, most of the markets are closed Saturday and Sunday. So if you have an additional Monday in a particular month, the number of transactions would go up because on Monday you also have all the transactions that have not been taking place during Saturday and Sunday. So then that is an example of why when one particular day might have an effect. In general, my suggestion there is that one regressor is enough. So it's enough to distinguish, at least for the type of series that we are dealing with in the statistical offices, it's enough to use the one regression approach. Also because the more regressors you use, in theory, the longer the time series you should have in order to then have a robust diagnostics. So here we come again to some question for you. So the first question is which are the kind of outliers that you can deal with? Okay, I see that this is clear enough, and maybe it was also quite obvious. And so let's take it to the next level. Apart from the outliers that I mentioned, yes, okay, I see Greece also answering. Apart from these three type of outliers, these are the typical that we deal with. Can you think about any different outlier which has not been mentioned there? Ramps, very good. Anything else? Seasonal outliers, very good. Seasonal outliers, very good. Okay, another type that is also existing, and I write it here, is called innovation outliers, which mainly happens when there is a change in the slope of the trend. So then the series will go like this, and then will go up there. Okay, so now the second question is, what are the causes of the calendar effects? Changes in trading days, no. On this, no. Economic circumstances, no. Okay, Marcus, this is a good one. Equal time intervals. So this is a good intuition, but still I don't have the right answer. Okay, maybe here then I was not clear enough, so if you can stop answering. The causes are the different reference period mainly, okay? Exactly, different number of Mondays or Tuesdays, but also different number of days in which we work and days in which we don't work, okay? For those that are interested in the literature, there is also some increasing interest in particular in the moving holidays. So the Easter, the Ramadan effect, but also the Chinese New Year, and the idea that I would like you to retain is that both the calendar and outlier identification and treatment is done before the seasonal adjustment with a regression approach for both. And what I'd like you to retain is that using a regression approach might mean that even if the number of working days are different in a month, they're not necessarily significantly different for the analysis. Okay, so let's move now to the part which is a little bit more mathematical. So I'd like to, not to scare you, that you will see some formulas now. In particular, these are needed in order to understand a little bit of the decomposition. And then I will try to give you the main intuition about the two main methods, the X13 ARIM and Tramosits, and about the ESS guideline, the European Statistical System guidelines. Okay, now basically in this slide we try to put together all the things that we have seen, we have said so far. X are the original series. And the idea of what we are trying to do is try to separate the trend, the cycle, seasonal part, and the regular component. And so in order to do this separation, of course, we need to have to do an assumption that these components should be linked by some mathematical relationship. And there are at least two main ways of doing this. There are also other ways which are not mentioned here. So one assumption is to have the additive decomposition. So assuming that the original series are actually given by the sum of the trend component plus the calendar component plus the seasonal component plus the regular component, or by the product of these components. So T times C times S times I. And here it's important also to have the intuition that in this multiplicative decomposition, you can actually go back to an additive decomposition by taking the logs. This is important also because it's one of the main options that it's also in the statistical process, you find that there is one of the parameters that you have to set when you're using JDEMETRA Plus, for instance, is that do you want to use a log decomposition, a log transformation or not. And so using the log transformation is the equivalent of using the multiplicative decomposition. So the assumption that the link between the different components is multiplicative. Of course, you can go even further there and have more components. Okay, so here I have added also different component: trend, calendar, seasonal component, outlier component, trading day component, moving day component, and irregular component in a additive decomposition. So you see that the equation that you are trying to write becomes more and more complicated with more and more variables, and that's also the reason why then at some point it's important to understand that you have to have a time series which is long enough before you can actually do this seasonal adjustment. And the idea of the exercise of seasonal adjustment per se is to identify how big are S and C and then remove it. So basically now the seasonal adjusted series is given by the trend plus the irregular component. And you see that both trend and irregular component are those that they include the outliers as we have seen in the slides before. So at the end of the process, the outliers are still in. Okay. When do we use the additive decomposition and when do we use the multiplicative decomposition? The additive decomposition is mainly used or when there is of course, there is no stationary in the mean, so it means that the mean goes up, so there is a trend, but there is a stationarity in the variance. So the variation between the minimum and the maximum and the peaks is pretty much stable over time. So in this case, you would use an additive decomposition. While in this other case, where we have no stationarity in the mean, and we have no stationarity in the variance, so you see that the difference between the peaks is increasing over time, then this is the typical case where you would use a multiplicative decomposition. In a simplified schema, you might think about these two shapes, basically. So variance, so the series is not stationary in the mean, so the mean is increasing, but the variance is stable. So you see the span. And in this other case, there is no stationary in the mean, and there is also no stationarity in the variance, so the variability is increasing, so we will use a multiplicative model. Okay. We will go back to this with some question afterwards. And now I move to the main seasonal adjustment philosophy. So how do we actually do this? What are the different philosophy? So you might want to do seasonal adjustment basically either with a non-parametric method or with a parametric method. The non-parametric being also the one which goes under the, which includes X12 ARIMA, one of the most used, and the model-based, which is a parametric method, which includes also tramosits. I'm mentioning these two among the family because also there are other methods that are being used, which are still in use and are accepted, but are not really recognized as the main best practice in Europe. So basically, in that category of non-parametric and parametric, then we find the main topics that the main approach that we think are relevant, which are the X13 ARIMA, which was developed by the US Census Bureau, the tramosits by the Bank of Spain, and actually here I start to introduce a little bit what is JDEMETRA Plus, which is mainly an interface to these two methods that have been competing for a long period in a kind of a fight, and now it's becoming at least what is the idea of JDEMETRA Plus is that these two methods that were available in two different software are actually now available in one single interface, and also the idea that you will see later that in the JDEMETRA Plus application, you can actually do much more than seasonal adjustment, which is anyway part of the time series analysis process. As we say, the XRMA is filter-based, and by nature, it's always able to estimate the seasonal components and remove it from it. We will see this also. I will say a few words about the filter later. And transit is a model-based, which is a variant of the non-observed components. So mainly there you were making some assumption of a model being the generator of the time series. So if you want the, I'm not so sure if, is this slide visible? Because on my laptop it's not very visible. Can someone in the chat confirm that issue? Okay, so are you able to read? Basically, the idea, yeah, okay, thank you. So the idea is that in the X13 ARIMA, you give unadjusted series. Then there is a reg ARIMA process that is happening with some filtering for the to identify the components. In particular, this filtering is working in the way using moving average filters, and I will say something later. And then there's a check on the diagnostics, and then when the diagnostics are okay, then basically an output which is produced. So if you want this the classical, I would call the smoothing process. Here I've inserted for you also some slides on exactly how the algorithms of X13, X11, which is implemented in X13, works. And as you know, you can download the slide after the presentation to also to give you a little bit of the idea what are the diagnostics that are being used in different parts. But I guess it's important to understand what is a filter here, because only if we understand what is a filter, then we can understand also the kind of logic of the X13 approach. Filter is a weighted average, where the sum of the weights that must sum to up. We have at least we have two kind of filters that are used in this method. One is the seasonal filters, which is used to estimate the seasonal component, and one is the trend filter. The seasonal filter is a seasonal moving average of consecutive values within a given month of a quarter. Okay? And normally it's expressed in n times n moving average, as m is the number of terms. Maybe what is more clear is from this graph, where we have a seasonal filter for the value of January 2013. So basically, a seasonal filter is the calculation of the moving average of the value of January 2013, together with the value of January 2012 and 2001, and also 2004, first quarter, and 2005. As you can see, this filter is symmetric because the number of terms that are on the left-hand side are the same. So in that way, you can see also on this nice graph that it's a symmetric filter. And this is a 5 terms filter because it includes 5 different observations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's divided by 9. So this is an example of the seasonal filter. As you can see, the weights are the same. A kind of difference is the trend filter, which are weights averaged of consecutive months and quarter to estimate the trend component. For instance, the trend filter for the first quarter 2005 would include the 2 previous value, the consecutive value, and plus the previous value and the 2 consecutive values. So these are a 2, 1, 2 times 5 times 4 filter, which includes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms. So let's see it again, maybe. So these are 3 times 3 filter. So 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1. So 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3 in vertical, with 5 terms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms. So it's a 3 times 3 filter, including 5 terms, moving average. While the trend filter is 2 in vertical times 1, 2, 3, and 4, which involves 5 terms. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay? And so the weights for the filters are the same. And if we go back to the process of the X13, I should have maybe presented this in a different order. You see that actually the X13 ARIMA basically starts with the trend filtering, then checks the diagnostics, the SI ratio, then identify the seasonal part with the seasonal filter, and then it continues until it finds good diagnostics on the irregular component. So I want you to think about this process as a moving average filtering process, which stops when the series are smooth enough. Okay? On the other side, the Tramosit's philosophy, the Tramosit's philosophy is based on the model identification. So you have the unadjusted figures, and the assumption you do is that there are different unobserved components which can be modeled by an ARIMA model, which is actually should meet the canonical decomposition. And if you want, the idea is that these different components are generated by different modeled processes, and basically what is Tramo doing is identifying the different generators of the process, which are then smoothed by the seed part of the application. So basically the process works in this way. There is the identification of the model parameter, so a selection of between additive and multiplicative decomposition. There is an automatic detection and correction for the outlier, testing for telling effect, and then with the regression user variable. And then so these 4 steps, if you want, are common with the X13 approach. What is very different is that the identification of the ARIMA model is now taking place, and actually this ARIMA fitting is the one that is also used for the forecasting purposes. So this, as I said, so the Tramo is the part that is identifying the ARIMA modeling, and SITS is actually the actual part which is doing the smoothing based on the Kolmogorov filters. And there are some assumptions that are done at this stage that, of course, the ARIMA model is the same, identified at the beginning, is the same that should apply after the end of the process. I understand that it's not very easy, maybe at this moment, to capture all the details of the differences. But what I want you to retain here at this very moment is that there is a different philosophy. From one side, there is the filter approach, the moving average part, and from the other side is the model assumption approach. So the idea of that you are able to identify the generator process. But in the end, you always have the different component, the trend, the calendar component, the seasonal component, the irregular, and what you keep in is just the trend plus the irregular. And actually, the idea is that what is left in the end, as you can see in these slides, that the irregular component should always behave as a white noise. More information about these methods can be found in this publication, for which I provide you also the link here, and maybe I would ask Ellie afterwards also maybe to put this link outside. So since there are different steps that are involved in the seasonal adjustment process, we have tried to produce some guidelines on how to proceed, where you find for each of the steps of seasonal adjustment different possibility, mainly the option A, B, and C, where A is the recommended option, B is the accepted one, and C is the one not to be retained. So if you want to know more, maybe it's worth to have a look to these guidelines, which took us some years to be produced. First version 2009, and then a more recent version in 2015. Okay, so let's stop now for some question for you. So the question is that what is a filter? And don't be funny about it. weighted average, okay, so seasonality. Okay, so and then model base, okay, weighted average on one side and so. Okay, and maybe a follow-up question is non-parametric, very good. While Tramosit is parametric, very good. And the follow-up question is that which are the kind of filters that are used in the process? Okay. So the follow-up question I have is that about the filter. Which are the two kind of filters that are used in X13? Seasonal and trend filter. Okay, that's good. And how are these filters symmetric or not? Yes. Okay. So then, since I can see that you're following very well, let's maybe go to the next level. And I'll go back to the example of the filter to see if you have the, oops, who is moving the slides? So the question, okay, I'm going back. Sorry. Okay, let's go here. Oops. Okay. So the question is, sorry to insist on the filter. As you can see, you have to do a moving average. But how do you do when you have to calculate the trend filter for the observations that are at the end of the series? Okay, you use the forecast with the ARIMA mode. Okay, Marcus, that's a very good intuition. So the idea is that those values, and of course, this is also the reason why, okay, forecasting, yeah, the ARIMA forecasting is used. And this is also the reason why the revisions at the end of the series are higher, because are based on forecasting. So now I'm not so sure what is happening to the slide, why they are jumping from one to another. But in the interest of time, let's proceed. So as I said, here now I try to put together what I think are the steps that are from the beginning to the end that you might want to do for doing seasonal adjustment, and also some words about JDEMETRA Plus. So step 0. First thing you do, you check if you have a time series or not, according to the definition that we have said in the very beginning. You check if you have at least 3 years for monthly series and 4 years for 16 for quarterly series. This is the minimum. Otherwise, you will not even be able to load the series in the application. And of course, you know, the idea is that since the structure of the irregular, so the diagnostics, are based on the white noise assumption of the residuals, of course, then, and so this is in the end a t-test. So the longer is the series, you have to be sure to have enough observation that you can trust the t-test. So that's why a certain number of observations are needed. So second thing to do, to visualize the data. As we have seen in the beginning, this might help to understand if you would like to use a multiplicative or an additive decomposition, in particular for the multiple decompositions, the one with the log transformation. But it also might help to visualize outliers and to see where they are and to see also which kind of outliers you're dealing with. Things that you normally don't see when you simply run the diagnostic test. So summing up, step number 3, check the stationarity in the variance. This can be crucial to decide if you want to use an additive or a multiplicative decomposition. Remember that if in your time series you have negative values, you have to use additive decomposition because of the log non-possibility of transforming it in logs. And actually another option it would be to add a constant to the series in order to shift the series up and then use a multiple decomposition and then to remove the constant. This is also another option that you might want to use. Then you look at the calendar effect. So this is always done with a regression-based approach, no proportional method. Remember to not use the proportional method. And here we're talking about trailing working day, leap year, moving holidays. The things that I'm mentioning are done in the same order as in the process. Then the outliers, dealing with the outliers. As I said, in theory, you might want to do this outlier identification outside the water software, which is, for instance, JDEMETRA Plus. So all these parts can be done before, in theory, are not really into the decision adjustment part, are in the what is also called the pre-treatment. So the outlier identification, the calendar adjustment, the type of model decomposition. Then you have the identification of the ARIMA model. Here, the criteria that are used are the Bayesian. Sorry, I'm very sorry for this. The Bayesian, the Vic, and the archaic criterion that will find a good trade-off between the order of the ARIMA model to be used and the number of variables that you are possible to be used in order to have robust diagnostics. Here, it's in the case you're using an X11 approach, you should check on the filter. As you've seen, now you know what are the different kinds of filters, and the idea in general is that the shorter is a short filter can work with a stable seasonal pattern, and a longer filter might be needed in case of not regular seasonal pattern. So if you want, the idea is that if the filter that has been identified by the algorithm is too long, this also might be a sign that the seasonality is not very regular. So you might even question if seasonal adjustment should be done or not. And something that actually I should have said in the beginning, it's very much possible that in a time series there is no regular seasonal pattern to be identified, so there is no seasonal adjustment to be done. And in that case, the original series and the seasonal adjusted one are of course the same. Then you check on the residuals. Basically, this is the step which is done by reading all the diagnostics. So the Lume box diagnostics. Here, what I'd like you to retain is that all the diagnostics are based on the residuals. So basically, the decision in the end, if your seasonal adjustment process is correct or not, is based on the way you have been able to model the residuals, and that are supposed to be white noise. Okay. And actually, something else that you might want to do at the end of the process is to check on the revisions, which might also lead to the decision to do or not to do the seasonal adjustment itself, and some suggestions regarding the publication, especially for those that work in a statistical office. There are some metadata, if you want, some minimal information that should always be put in a methodological note, where you mention the method that you're using, you're mentioning the parameters that you have identified. You also might want to mention the aggregation policy for those of you that maybe already have seen or they will have a look. I invite you to read in the seasonal adjustment guidelines, the chapter on direct versus indirect adjustment, where basically you have to decide at which level of aggregation you want to run the seasonal adjustment. You should also specify in this document if you're doing working day adjustment or not, what is your revision policy, and how often, for instance, you update your model. And what is also very much welcome is an address contact. Okay, so now let's speak about JDEMETRA Plus. As I mentioned at the very beginning, JDEMETRA Plus is not only for seasonal adjustment, it's an econometric tool for seasonal calendar adjustment. It was developed by the Bank of Belgium with some financing by Eurostat. Actually, you should know that also the European Central Bank is now involved in the community of developers. But then, as you will see, originally the history, the reason why it was developed, it was to basically to rewrite in Java the implementation of the Tramosits and X12 ARIMA algorithm. So basically the J stands for Java. So for those of you that have used the DEMETRA in the past, basically this is DEMETRA was written in Fortran, the original version. Here the developers have rewritten all the modules in Java, and apart from seasonal adjustment, what is now possible to do with JDEMETRA Plus is also benchmarking, template disaggregation, and other things that I will tell in the next slide. And what is important is that JDEMETRA Plus is open source. So basically, you can adapt it to your own IT environment. You can add functionalities that are not originally there. In theory, you can also fix bugs if they are present. And you can use it, it's under the UPL license, which mainly means that it's for free, and you can reuse it as you wish. Okay, this is a little bit of history, so just to tell you that this is a continuous and evolving project and process. So since 2002, we have been working on this application, and now we are 2015. So 2015 for us was a little bit the anno nobile of the application JDEMETRA Plus, because it was the year when actually the 2.0 version was released, and sorry, I'm very sorry for this, not so sure why the mouse. The 2015 version was released, and this was also done in jointly with the Bundesbank that is now developing the application. So the main characteristic of now of this new version is that, as I said, it's flexible. So we have the leading algorithm, but in theory can also evolve independently. So if you are using a different philosophy or method which is not implemented in JDEMETRA Plus, in theory you can add it. There is a nice, pretty well, we are working on this, pretty nice graphical user interface. There are, as I said, some plugins. So you have the core engine, which is doing seasonal adjustment, but you also have some other modules that are doing other, that are allowing to perform other econometric techniques, like temporal disaggregation, for instance, which is a technique which allows you to derive, for instance, monthly data from quarterly data, or derive quarterly data from annual data, and so on. And then what is also important is that there is a process for to manage with the large data set, which can be done mainly in two ways. There is what is the so-called cruncher, or you can also place the JDEMETRA Plus application directly on your server. And there is also a version which actually does all the job in a remote environment using web services. And the idea there is that you don't have your data locally stored, but the application is on a server, and the data are also on a server, and then actually you just have to link the two things, but there are no files that are stored locally. And so this makes much easier the work of sharing the parameters with other colleagues or users that are interested. What is important to know is that in all this process of development, there are different actors that have been involved, different statistical institutes, different colleagues of yours, maybe also some that are now attending, or the people that are now attending this webinar, they know people that have been involved. And it's a large-scale test that is being done. And actually, the idea is that So the purpose of the main initial test is to compare the performances against the original application and check if the algorithms that were written in Java were actually able to duplicate the algorithms which were written in Fortran. And all this process ended with a kind of official blessing of this application, and you find here some reference that since February 2015, the European Central Bank, Eurostat, and some other statistical office, they decided to endorse JDEMETRA Plus as the official application for doing seasonal adjustment in official statistics. And believe it or not, the power of this official letter is much bigger than all the convincing arguments that I've tried to sell you so far about why we should do some adjustment and why to do it this way, not in the other way. I mean, this let's call it official letter, but communication by the Eurostat and ECB had a kind of side effect. Sorry, I'll go to the next one. And so that many statistical offices are actually migrating and incorporating JDEMETRA Plus into their environment. So, and here you have a list, a few examples of the countries that are using it. This is a question that normally is very much asked. And of course, where do I find it? You find everything, the link that I provided here. Maybe I will ask Ellie again also to share these other links where you find the manual for the user manual, but also some documentation regarding the methods that are implemented in the application. And what is important to know is that everything is on GitHub. GitHub is a public repository for people that are doing software development, and this is also a big difference between the past and why we believe that it's useful to use JDEMETRA Plus, is that by accessing the platform, you can be in contact directly with the developers. That means that if you are not happy with something that is not working in the application, then you can signal this to the developers, and there is a ticket which is open, and then in the next release, the bug would be hopefully being fixed. As said, one of the advantages of JDEMETRA Plus is that you can do other things. And here you have a kind of list of what we are working on. Structural model, chain linked indexes, as I mentioned already, benchmarking and disaggregation. But we also have a dedicated module for dynamic nowcasting and business cycle analysis. So these are under development, and also the list of the plugins are available on the website and at the link that I provided before. This is just to show you that in theory, and if you are interested, you could also try to think about additional steps that they normally come after seasonal adjustment or before seasonal adjustment, for instance, the validation process that you might want to do afterwards. And of course, you cannot do, if you think that you have an interest in learning how to do this, we have an STP course that is coming up in September, and you can register at the link that is provided there. And in this course, it's a kind of advanced, and would be normally people that have attended this webinar would be the ideal target for that course. So where you would be in a training room for 3 days with the developers, and you will be able to understand not only how to use the software, but also eventually how to become able to develop additional plugins to make the software fit into your IT environment. So this is the link. The registration deadline is in July. The course is free of charge. Just be aware that if you are interested in attending this course, please register as soon as you can, because normally we get a lot of requests for attending this advanced course. So maybe, Hailey, if I can ask you to share also the link on slide 81. Okay. Then, what if, so you think you are able to use the software, you know the software, you know what to do, but at some point you are in trouble because something does not fit with your data. Something else which is existing and it's maybe interesting, and Ali maybe also slide 82, is that you are not alone. So apart from the training, there is Center of Excellence is an adjuster that can be contacted. This Center of Excellence is composed by different statistical authorities. So currently includes France, UK, Portugal, Latvia, and no, I don't remember, and Italy, of course, and then the fifth one. So basically, there is also kind of remote help desk that can be used. By accessing the links that are provided there, you can simply ask questions that are generic questions, but you can also share your files, which are treated confidentially, and you get an ad hoc assistance in remote. So as I said, this is complementary to the other type of training that we do. These are kind of remote assistance. And in theory also to the help desk, to the Center of Excellence, you can also ask for coaching sessions to take place in your country. I know that some of the people that are attending are not alone. We have more than one person in front of the PC. So maybe you might be interested in having a coaching session of 2 or 3 days directly in your country. This has been done in the past for Greece, in Portugal, and other cases. Okay, so I think I come to my last set of questions. Okay. Okay. So Georgia is typing. Then it's possible to, Marcus, is this a question that you're asking, or, okay, it's the reason, okay, yes, it's the reason why this compares to alternatives. But there is one bigger reason of using JDEMETRA Plus, which is apart from what JDEMETRA Plus does. Flexible, okay. Yeah, also other software are flexible. Incredible plugin. Okay, Brita, lots of support. This is the guidelines. So if you stop answering for a moment, just I mean, the main thing is that is the support. So basically, in using JDEMETRA Plus, you have people behind this application. So if things are not working, you have trainings that are going to take place. You have assistance that can be provided in remote or in face-to-face. And I'm very happy to see that Lina Taz is with us from Morocco. So hi, Lina. Very nice to see you. So mainly the main advantage of using JDEMETRA Plus is the network of experts that are coming from all over Europe that is behind the application. Okay, and of course it's open. Was not able to do a direct adjustment in JDEMETRA Plus. Okay, I think it's possible. Maybe we have different to do indirect adjustment. Okay. So regarding the other question, what are the main steps for seasonal adjustment? Okay, Georgia, good. This is a good summary by Georgia. And don't forget to add the publication, so the methodological notes to be added. I see that people are typing. I don't know if they're trying to answer to the question. So I think that we are ready for the last slide from my side. So these are the questions for me. It's optional. Okay, yes, Carlo, sure. Okay, so now it's time for questions for me. So the first one, and please don't type now at this moment. The first one is about the indirect adjustment. So first of all, we have to understand what is direct and indirect. Indirect seasonal adjustment is when you seasonal adjust the component of a particular aggregate, and then you sum the seasonal adjusted components, and that one is your indirectly seasonal adjusted variable. So this for sure is possible to be done. It's enough to load the components. What I think people are referring now in the chat is that there is a particular additional option where you can actually run the direct versus the indirect adjustment at the same time, but I'm not so sure. Yeah, the tool. Okay, yes, to the components. So these are particular issues. It's on comparing the direct versus the indirect tools, which is different from the question, can we do indirect seasonal adjustment in JDEMETRA Plus or not? We can do indirect seasonal adjustment. The plugin that tries to verify direct versus indirect is still a prototype and still not working, but maybe I can have some follow-up bilateral discussion or by email with Marcus, which is interested, and Jonathan, which is also interested, and yeah, these things. Okay, other questions for me now? Okay, first question by Maria. Okay, question by Marcus. Let's take a third one by Antoine. Okay, there are two questions. So the question raised by Maria, unfortunately the answer is no, but as I mentioned, this is something that now in theory you can help to develop, so we don't have a specific tool that is available. And the second one, the intuition, Marcus is correct, that is not longer supposed to be important. I think that it was never supposed to be important. Okay, so let's take some other questions. Okay, so we have I think that Antoine is typing the additional question. So in the meantime, so the question by Britta, is it possible to learn in a 3-day course as offered? I'm not so sure if I understand the question. Maybe Britta, if you can reformulate. Regarding the question by Marcus on the outliers, I mentioned that what would be good is that when you identify an outlier, you add in a methodological note an economic explanation that would help to understand if that outlier is an additive outlier, a transitory change, or a level shift. As said, no matter which of the 3 types of outliers, the outliers will always be retained in the file, in a final output. So, and should not be removed. That was my main message. Okay, the question from Antoine, my question is about serious and team preservation. Do we have to mention before disaggregate? Okay, here it's good that I'm asking this question. I'd like to inform that we are actually writing some guidelines on temporal disaggregation as well. And the main message that will come from there is that temporal disaggregation, especially when it's done to preserve the consistency, should always be done in the end of the process. Okay, so regarding the question for Britta, yes, it is possible. Actually, the course we have in September is advanced, so if you have attended this webinar, normally you will be able to attend the other one. But we also have entry course that are for people that are completely new of 3 days that will take place, I guess, in January next year. Regarding the question by Nikolaitis concerning the level shift and long seam, is this including the trend? Yes. Yes. Level shift is always assimilated to the trend component. Okay, and with that, I think I can give back the floor to Ellie, maybe.
Okay, thank you also from my side. Thank you for Dario for the well-done presentation. Thank you for our 50 attendees who have been very proactive and posed questions and answered questions. And last but not least, I would thank our IT support, I think it was onemeeting.com, who has got us started with this webinar's journey 5 sessions ago, and next time will be with a new webinar tool that the Commission is changing the provider here in this case. I would now open the space for you to download the presentation of Dario if you want. I will then tomorrow send you the links, presentations, and also the links to the other slides that Dario was talking about. And now Dario can start tweeting.
Yeah.
Right?
No, then you asked me the picture, so I take the picture now so I can send it to you.
Let me see where I find the files. They are somewhere here, right? And so I keep this space open still for another 10-15 minutes. So those who want to have the slides immediately can have it here, and those other ones will get the presentations then tomorrow. So thank you very much. Have a nice evening, and we hope to see you back next week, 3rd of May, the usual time. We may open the space a little bit earlier because you have to see that you have your WebEx plugins and such likes. But I've also sent in the message a link to that tomorrow. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye everyone.